Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. I'm going to share my presentation with you all. And I first, of course, want to thank the folks at the Center for the Study of Childhood Art for inviting me to be here. This is my first time sharing online the journey and story of this book that just came out last month. It came out and was published on Valentine's Day, which was also serendipitously Arizona's 100th birthday. And the book was born in Arizona. And so a local newsletter in California called the book A Love Letter to Immigrant Children. And I totally agree with that. So I'm really honored and happy to be here sharing this work with you all. So I'll start by sharing the argument of the book. The book argues that young immigrant children are not passive in the face of the challenges presented by U.S. anti-immigrant policies. Through an analysis of pre-adolescence drawings, theater performances, and family interviews, we can gain key insight into both the impact of the deportation machinery on immigrant children's lives and how they develop personal agency to creatively respond, manage their emotions, and reimagine the dilemmas presented by anti-immigrant rhetoric and legal violence. Where this journey began. So the origin story of this book came from my time working as a mentor at a community center in Phoenix, Arizona. There, I was in charge of creating a summer arts camp. And I was very excited because I took young people through mask making, poetry, dance. I had practitioners come and share their art with them. And we were culminating this summer program with a mural. And I had a muralist and we were crafting things and having dialogue with students. And I asked the kids, what do you want this mural to be about? And I was very impacted when a 9-year-old raised his hand and said, can we make a mural about peace? And I said, that sounds like a lovely idea. Can you tell me what peace looks like to you? And he responded with, it looks like Sheriff Joe Arpaio shaking hands with a Mexican. And that was so powerful. Other kids started to talk about what Sheriff Joe Arpaio was doing in the community, sharing stories about not being able to find their family members who'd gone missing and that they were scared of him. And what was even worse was that the community center didn't allow us to do a mural that was going to be called or thought of as controversial. And so seeing the disappointment in a lot of these children's faces, I said, well, how about you do a drawing or a poem or write a letter about why this mural is important to you? And that day, I left with about 50 drawings that were so powerful that it really made me commit to this work of making sure that as many people as possible would be able to see these images. And so I'm going to share some of the images from that time in Arizona that started the idea of the book. First, I want to share this drawing. This was the main image that pulled me into this work. It spoke to me in a very profound way. It was like holding a mirror to my life and the lives of many other immigrant people. Gabby was 14 years old when she drew this. Her and her family lived along Van Buren Street, which is one of the poorest and most ignored communities of Phoenix, Arizona. She and many of the youth I met lived in a community of mobile homes right across the street from the school and the community center there where I worked. She would come into the center with a backpack full of homework that we would work on together. Gabby would always volunteer to help me pass out peanut butter and grape jelly sandwiches. One day, Gabby ran into the center with no backpack, telling me that the sheriffs have taken her dad. Because of immigration, she cried. Soon, her dad was deported, and her mother struggled to make ends meet. Gabby stopped coming to the community center, and she was even afraid to go to school because she thought that her mom would also be taken during one of the raids. Here in the drawing, the sun, trees, and flowers are all depressed, and people in the house are frowning. The family feels that metaphorically, they are living in a cage, unable to have contact with the outside world. Gabby's drawing foreshadows the insidious immigration policies that would continuously become more restrictive through things like the reformed prisons called family daycare centers, where toddlers are detained with their parents. This image is symbolic of the ways that the US continues to disappear family members or take children away from their parents as a means of surveillance, coercion, and control, going from caged childhoods to caged children in the span of just 2 political administrations. And I echo Laura Briggs's work in Taking Children, because this historically repeats the separation, enslavement, and sale of Black children to white families, the detention of Japanese Americans in internment camps, and the kidnapping of Native American children from their communities to be Americanized in boarding schools. These are tactics used to bring hopelessness, despair, and grief to a community and a lineage of people. But Gabby was not the only child that I worked with at the community center in Phoenix who wanted to visualize the story of detention and deportation through drawings. Here are a couple more. So this is Laura, who's 9 years old, and depicts a nighttime arrest of a Mexican mom and her dad, where Sheriff Dorapayo, as you see on the left, handcuffs the parents in front of the son and daughter on the right side. And the people at the bus stop are bearing witness not being able to help, saying things like OMG and with hearts. And you see this depiction of a dark and stormy night with the thunder, the big moon, huge clouds, and the word night underlined. Similarly, another car arrest is Julio's drawing, who's 10 years old, and drew the sheriff with paper white skin handcuffing a brown man who is saying, "Don't take me, I have a family to take care of." And the one arresting replies, "I don't care," with 9 exclamation points. As you can see, the sheriff and his deputy were very important figures in the drawings. Again, 7-year-old Cynthia can describe important nuances of a nighttime arrest of an individual on their knees with a shirt that reads, "I am Mexican." She also labels one of the officers as sheriff, but includes a police car vehicle. And finally, Pedro here and Alex share their drawings that, despite having a larger piece of paper and all the color pencils, markers, crayons available to them, Pedro only chose to do a drawing on the bottom left corner, leaving the rest of the page blank, really highlighting the loneliness and isolation in this drawing. And then Alex on the right draws this in just pencil, not wanting to include any color and also not using the rest of the page. And these were very powerful images that really caught my eye. And the last one from the work in Arizona that I'll share is of 12-year-old Omar. He said, "In Arizona, the sheriff, Dorapayo, arrests any person that looks Mexican, no matter if they are a US citizen or not. He sends them to jail where they get beat up and treated like animals. That leaves kids alone in the USA, away from their parents, to get adopted by a family member if lucky." The image that you see that Omar drew that accompanies this paragraph is a critique on American ideals with the patriotic red, white, and blue of freedom is America, but a sarcastic "yeah, right" in pencil below. This caricature satirizes the sheriff and points out the daily dehumanization of families like Omar's. This work in Arizona led me to create a dissertation project that eventually became this book that highlights the stories of not only children in Phoenix, Arizona, but also in Los Angeles, California. And so when I started this work in 2008, Obama was president. Most of the work came from community centers, and most of the kids were Mexican American or of Mexican families. And I collected 200 drawings there. So this part of the project has a heavier focus on visual art. And then when I did this project in California in 2014, it was a really important time because it was during the election. And then the second time that I did this project and worked at the school, it was Trump's first year in office. So the data from this time gives us insight into children's perceptions pre and post-Trump. So this project is school-based, and I worked with Mexican and Central American children. I collected 135 drawings. However, this part of the project has more of a focus on performance art and theater. And to do this project, I partnered with the Los Angeles Unified School District and the Social and Public Art Resource Center. And together we were able to create various art curricula that we brought to the school. And I was specifically in charge of developing a theater curriculum for bilingual students in 6th grade. And so along with developing the curriculum, I also conducted interviews with the students, the families, the teachers, the school administrators. I also had a whole year to conduct home and school observations. And I recorded every single class session, performance, practice. I also had pre and post surveys, but most of this work, I would say, relies on an analysis of the drawings and the journal entries that I collected from children in both locations. To do this work, I relied, and specifically the theater curriculum, I borrowed from these 3 types of methods in pedagogy, starting with the Teatro Campesino that was started on the picket lines of the United Farm Workers Movement in 1965. And there, farm workers would perform skits on the backs of trucks that would drive through farm working fields to educate people and organize folks on the issues that were happening in the community. And the company performed what they called actos, or short skits. And the work of El Teatro Campesino really focuses on satirizing the opposition, as you see here in this image. I also borrow from Theater of the Oppressed, started by Augusto Boal in Brazil. And Theater of the Oppressed is a set of participatory techniques and games that seek to motivate people, restore true dialogue, and create a space for participants to take action. And there are many modalities of Theater of the Oppressed, but I mostly relied on image theater and newspaper theater. And then I also borrowed heavily from Paulo Freire's work on problem-posing pedagogy. And this really focused on helping develop students' power to critically perceive the way that they exist in the world. So often I would have students go home and watch the news, and then we'd come and talk about what was the most important thing that you saw, or what is worrying you about what you saw. And we use that dialogue to create skits. So I believe that overall, this work has a few interventions that I would like to mention. First, to provide insight about an understudied student and child population, to provide creative tools to counter the effects of toxic stress on students, to center art as the visual testimonies, positioning children as active agents, and to advance interdisciplinary, critical, and culturally sustaining pedagogies. So now I want to turn to the work in California. And the following story comes from one of the chapters in the book. And overall, the findings are that children who are part of mixed status families are deeply preoccupied with detention, deportation, and heightened anti-immigrant sentiments. However, through the art-making process, educators can help facilitate moments of reflection, coping, and resilience. Although there are so many stories from my years working with children in California, I want to just highlight one. And this is through 2 of my students, Eric and Elisa. During one of our check-in activities, students were sharing their journal reflections and drawings of what they did during that weekend. That weekend happened to be Mother's Day. Students shared about going out to dinner and having celebrations for their moms. I noticed that Elisa was not as animated as she usually was. When it was her turn to share, she showed a cartoon she made of a woman, and under that image was a sentence in Spanish that read, "I miss my mom so much. I have not seen her in 2 years." Elisa is 12, but made the journey alone from El Salvador to Los Angeles when she was only 10 years old. In LA, she reunited with her aunt and her cousin Eric, who is in the same class. Although Elisa is happy to be in LA with her family or extended family and to be attending school, she suffers very much because she's unable to be with her mom and depends on Facebook and video chats to keep in touch with her. Eric and Elisa walk together to school every day, but they don't really hang out. Miss Sol, the 6th grade teacher, calls Eric one of the good students because Eric is serious and likes to focus on his schoolwork. One day, when we were figuring out what the word immigrant meant, Eric raised his hand and said, "I know my cousin Alex," and then followed up and said, "I was so happy that my cousin Alex was coming to the US, but he actually died in the desert. I guess of starvation or thirst, I don't know. We didn't know anything about my cousin until we saw on the news that his body was found on the border." That moment was very moving, and while I took some time to talk to Eric about his emotions and how he was feeling, I had students do a drawing or take a moment to journal. And Elisa, who's his cousin, made this image during that moment. Framed by the sun and the moon, the cacti brings us to the desert, a small cross with the name Alex below. However, the most important part of this image is the television set in the center. That says the name of the news show, Primer Impacto, or First Impact in English. And it truly was, because this is how they found out that Alex's body was found. And this drawing, I argue, is an altar. It's an homage to the life of Alex. It's a way of remembering. Here, Elisa commemorates the life of her cousin, and this isn't unlike the many murals, t-shirts, social media posts, songs, and street altars or ofrendas that youth in many inner cities have to create to remember and grieve. When reading her journal entry for that day that accompanied this drawing, she wrote, "My cousin was a great person. My aunt loved him a lot. He didn't want her to work so much. Weeks passed since he left. We knew he was walking through the desert, but we did not hear from him. The news was also broadcasted in El Salvador. We could not believe it. Months later, they sent his body back. My aunt buried his body without telling anyone. Until this day, it causes us a lot of pain to talk about this. Rest in peace, Alex." This moment of journaling provided a time for reflection, and drawing allowed for processing. And the sharing was a way of coping. This gave Eric and Elisa the space, time, and permission to talk about what was not to be mentioned at home. Here, they turned individual pain into a moment of collective support. For the rest of the class, this was very impactful and resonated. They started sharing stories about their own moments of grief and loss and pain. The story in particular, however, was so memorable that months later, when it was time to create our final performance for the whole school and showcase in front of the parents and everyone, we remembered this story when doing that. And usually I have everyone sit in a circle and one person at a time says one line until we create a story with a beginning, a middle, and end. And one of the first students to share a line for our play said, "My name is Alex, and I'm going to cross the border," remembering this story and bringing us back here. However, this moment of imagination was powerful to create a future that they did want. Here, rather than dying on the border, Alex, the main character, migrates with the help of 2 other children accompanying him through the desert. And they also have help from a half human, half coyote magical creature that guides them through all of the dangers on the border. Here in this play, in this storyboard of the whole performance, children were able to embody an alternative possibility for survival. I'm going to share a very short 4-minute clip of one of the practices from this play. And you'll hear things like no talking butts, which is just a fun way of saying that you should always face your audience. You'll hear laughter, stage directions, and volume requests.
Hi, my name is Valeria. This is my brother Alex. This is my cousin Valentina. Hi. Hey guys, and today we will try to visit our parents. Miren, ahí viene nuestro tío. Nos va a dar los papeles para que nos vayamos al aeropuerto. Louder, talking about. Gracias. Gracias, tío. Gracias.
Bye. Buena suerte.
Vámonos porque si no se nos va a perder el vuelo. Corre.
And of course, the easiest way to cross multiple borders is by plane, but you'll see the TSA agents find the documents suspicious.
Yes. Give me moments.
The documents are suspicious, so they have no other option but to migrate through the desert.
Como ya no sé qué si no tenemos coyote. Miren, ahí viene uno. Hi, I'm Ben. This is Hayon. Damn, Daniel. Everybody backstage. Oh, bad idea, but the sun is setting, so let's sleep here.
And of course, the parents are also there to help.
¿Dónde están mis hijos? Ellos no van a vida. What is someone kidnapped them? I don't know what to do. Look, there's a security guard. I will make a fast that they come. You can check the security guard and I'll take you to open the hole to the top of the brain. Okay, bye. Hello, Mr. Security Guard.
Hello, what are you doing here?
Where's the restroom?
Over there. I'll take you because you could go by yourself.
Take me to the restroom, please.
Go.
No. Okay, I'm gonna put a hole to the ticket to come. Oh, there's Trump.
But of course, Trump is also at the border checking on the wall that he wants to build, but finds that the security guard has gone missing.
So here's the border.
Where's the security guard for right here?
I don't know.
What do you mean you don't know? This is your job.
I don't know.
You're fired.
Why? Please give me another chance.
No, get out of here. Bye. Why is it so dusty? Achoo. Oh, my leg!
So this wig falling is so important, and it's the reason that the family is able to be together again. And you'll see the wig fall again in a second.
Viejo, vete para acá, ya vinieron los hijos.
So I include in this short clip the moment where they're practicing bowing, because you'll see that when the kid playing Trump bows and the wig falls off, the kids around him start laughing. And when we performed this in front of the whole school, that was the moment that changed everything. Here, people started laughing and giggling, and I argue that this was the moment everybody lost fear. This bright blonde yellowish wig that the student wears, juxtaposed by his brown skin, serves as a symbol of power. The moment that the wig falls, through humor, they're able to take back that power. The satire that makes fun of Trump's hair is how they mirror the dehumanization that they experience. And I agree with Royles Gonzalez, who says that only the magic of laughter could radically and credibly suspend the seriousness of an entire social system of oppression. Overall, children in Arizona and California demonstrate righteous indignation to dehumanization and racism, while reimagining through art as a form of resisting violence and developing resilience. The story of Alex, through the narrative of Eric and Elisa, illustrates how anti-immigrant laws ultimately impact children and create stress and trauma that impacts their academic performance, mental health, and well-being. Yet through art, educators and practitioners can help children challenge these power structures and develop tools for coping. We know that already children of immigrants must navigate multiple borders, not only physical borders, but metaphorical ones too, like going from school and home, code switching through various social contexts and locations. This third, sometimes marginal space leads to an imaginative potential. And scholars like W. Du Bois, Gloria Anzaldúa, Leo Chavez, Pat Savella, Lynn Stevens have called this in-betweenness, nepantla, double consciousness, liminal space, or interstitiality, to describe how a person's life is shaped by two cultures, and yet they might feel that they don't belong neither here nor there. Children of immigrants often have citizenship, but not membership in American society. And literature on immigrant children can tend to deem them passive, enforcing narratives of victimization. But here I strive to position children as active agents of their own stories, where through theater, drawing, and humor, they're able to speak back and reimagine destructive situations in ways that some adults cannot. I want to end with a quote from Miss Sol, who was the teacher of the 6th grade class. And Miss Sol says, "Art, I see it as their medicine. These boys were notorious at the school from kinder until 6th grade to be terrors. I really think it was healing them. Theater was an escape from who they are." But this book asks us to question, what if children did not need an escape from their communities or from who they are? Drawing Deportation provides a roadmap for how art can provide a safe and necessary space for vulnerable populations to assert their humanity in a world that would rather divest them from it. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to any discussion, dialogue.